The sun was sinking behind the palms of Harborview Park when the child appeared small, determined, and far too brave for her 9 years. The sky was brushed with orange and rose. That soft Florida glow that makes everything look gentler than it is. But nothing about this moment was gentle. Not the way the girl's fingers clenched, the wrinkled envelope. Not the way she moved with a purpose that didn't belong to someone her age. And certainly not the man she was walking toward. Lila Hart held $7, crumpled bills she had saved from lunch money and odd errands, and those $7 had brought her to the most dangerous man in Tampa. Victor DeLuca sat alone on a bench facing the water. His posture relaxed. His expression unreadable. People always said the same things about him. He never raised his voice. Never lied. Never made threats he didn't intend to carry out. He didn't tolerate anyone harming a child, and he lived by a code so strict it bordered on religion. He was the kind of man whose silence could fill an entire room with fear. But today, even the air around him seemed to hold its breath. The locals walking the park gave him polite distance, one of those unspoken rules everyone followed without question. You didn't sit too close to Victor DeLuca. You didn't look too long. You didn't ask what he was thinking. And you certainly didn't approach him, which is why the sight of a little girl marching straight toward him was enough to make a few heads turn, and then quickly turn away again. Lila walked until she stood 5 feet from him. Her shoes scuffed. Her hair pulled back in a crooked ponytail. She didn't look frightened. She looked like a child who had run out of places to turn. Victor's gaze lifted from the horizon to her face. He didn't speak. He rarely did until someone earned his words. The girl swallowed, took one step closer, and said in a voice steadier than she expected, "Are you Mr. DeLuca?" Victor didn't confirm or deny it. He simply regarded her with the calmness of someone who already knew the answer. Lila tightened her fingers around the small envelope and said, "I need help, and I can pay." For the first time in a very long time, something flickered in Victor's eyes. Interest, curiosity, and beneath that, something like concern. "Let me see it," he said. The girl placed the envelope in his hand, with the seriousness of someone handing over a legal agreement. Victor opened it. Inside were 3 crumpled $1 bills, and 4 quarters pressed into the corners, to keep them from falling out. Folded beneath the money was a note written in a child's careful handwriting. He unfolded the paper slowly, as though he already sensed what he was about to read. "Please make my mum's boyfriend leave. He hurts us." Victor stared at the words, and then at the girl. He had faced armed men without blinking. He had sat across from federal agents, and never once looked away. But this small plea in a child's uneven writing, cut deeper than any threat ever could. Lila stood very still, watching him with a quiet, tense fear of someone waiting to discover whether she had made the greatest mistake of her life, or the best decision she had ever found the courage to make. "How did you find me?" Victor asked finally, his voice low, even, impossible to read. Lila looked down at her shoes. He talks on the phone when he drinks. I heard him say one night that everyone's scared of you, even the police. So I thought, maybe he'll be scared of you too." She lifted her eyes to his. There was no manipulation there. No theatrics. Just a child's desperate, brillant logique. Find the man the monster fears. Victor folded the note and slipped it into his jacket. For a long moment he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was softer than anyone would expect from a man like him. "Where's your mother now home?" Lila said. "She's sick a lot." "Daniel, She stopped, her throat tightening. "My little sister is only 4. She doesn't understand what's happening." Victor nodded once. The motion slow and deliberate. He understood more in those few words than most people could in a lifetime. He held the envelope back out to her. She shook her head. "It's all I have," she said. "But I can get more. I don't care how long it takes." "You misunderstand," Victor said. He took her small hand in his gloved one and gently pressed the envelope back into her palm. "You've already paid enough." Lila frowned in confusion. "So, you're going to help us?" Victor didn't smile. He rarely did. But something softened in his expression. "Just barely." "Yes." The answer was so simple, so absolute, that it momentarily stole the breath from Lila's lungs. "Why?" she whispered. "Because someone should have protected you long before you ever had to walk up to me." He reached into his pocket and took out a business card blank. No name. No number. Just a smooth, matte surface. He handed it to her, along with a pen that gleamed in the fading light. "Write your address," he said. Lila printed the information in the same careful, shaky handwriting as the note. Victor memorized it with one glance. "What's his name?" he asked. "Daniel Knux. It's all I have," she said. "But I can get more. I don't care how long it takes." "You misunderstand," Victor said. He took her small hand in his gloved one and gently pressed the envelope back into her palm. "You've already paid enough." Lila frowned in confusion. "So, you're going to help us?" Victor didn't smile. He rarely did. But something softened in his expression. "Just barely." "Yes." The answer was so simple, so absolute, that it momentarily stole the breath from Lila's lungs. "You'll know," he said. Lila stepped back, gripping the envelope tightly. She didn't smile, but her shoulders, which had been locked for so long, seemed to lower, just a fraction. She turned and walked away, her small figure slowly swallowed by the shadows of the park. Victor watched until she disappeared completely. Only then did he pull out his phone. He pressed one number. A voice answered instantly. Boss Victor didn't waste a second. "I need everything you can find on a man named Daniel Knox," he said. "Address is being sent to you now." "Yes, sir." "Priority." Victor looked at the folded note in his hand. The uneven letters. The plea written by a child who had run out of hope. "The highest," he said. When he ended the call, the park was quiet again. The breeze from the bay carried the faint scent of salt. The sky had deepened into indigo. Most people walked past Victor De Luca, with their heads down, praying never to draw his attention. But today, for the first time in years, he found himself grateful that someone had. And as he rose from the bench, slipping the note into the inner pocket of his jacket, he knew one thing, with absolute certainty. Daniel Knox's days of hurting anyone were already over. He simply didn't know it yet. The city moved through the night, without knowing that something dark and something strangely noble had begun shifting beneath its surface. While Lila Hart slept in a small twin bed beside her little sister, Victor De Luca's world was already awake and working. His phone call from the park had rippled outward like a shockwave. And by the time he arrived back at his penthouse office, the first threads of information were already waiting. Victor trusted very few people, but the men in his inner circle understood one thing without needing it spoken. When Victor said, "priority," it was no longer business. It was personal. His lieutenant, Marco Santoro, stood by the windows overlooking the harbor. He didn't turn when Victor entered. He simply laid a folder on the table. "We started digging." Victor took the folder without replying. The first page showed a photograph of Daniel Knox, late 30s, a face that tried to smile for the DMV camera, but failed. Something mean lingered beneath the surface, something hungry. Victor flipped through the pages. 2 domestic disturbance reports. Marco said, "No charges filed." Neighbors said they heard yelling, screaming, slammed doors. Victor scanned the summaries. Rachel Hart had told officers she fell down the stairs. Lila had run into a door. The officers had written the words, but the truth bled through the lines of every report. Marco continued. He's got a gambling problem. Owes money to a couple of low-level guys outside Ybor City. Not enough to get him killed. At least not yet. But enough to make him desperate. Victor didn't speak. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And he isolates the mother. Marco added quietly. Keeps her from her friends. Controls their money. Monitors her phone. The usual pattern. There was a moment of silence. The kind that grows heavy and dangerous. Victor closed the file. The mother's sick. Marco nodded. Auto-immune condition. She's on medication that costs more than she can afford. He handles the pharmacy pickups, keeps the pills locked up, so she stays compliant. Victor's eyes narrowed. He uses her illness to control her. Marco hesitated. Then said, men like him usually do. Victor leaned back in his chair. Finger steepled in front of him. Men who hurt children don't walk away clean. Marco nodded once. A soldier receiving orders without needing them spoken. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the distant hum of the city. Victor De Luca was a man who made decisions with meticulous precision. He was never impulsive, never sloppy. But the note in his jacket pocket, the uneven letters, the simple plea from a child, had awakened something cold and certain in him. He set the file down. Bring the others. The room filled quickly. These were men who knew how to handle problems. Each with a different method and a different philosophy. Victor listened without interrupting as they laid out their proposals. One suggested a confrontation public. Terrifying. A warning no one would forget. Another said they could stage a bar fight gone wrong. A third proposed something more extreme. Something that would send a message to anyone else in the city who dared lay a hand on a child. Victor let them speak. He let the ideas hang in the air, like smoke. Then he shook his head. No. Nothing messy. Nothing loud. Nothing that brings the police to her door. The girl and her mother have seen enough. The men exchanged glances. It wasn't the decision they expected from a man with Victor's history. But they nodded. His word was law. Marco stepped forward. What do you want done? Victor tapped the folder. He owes money, yes. Buy the debt. Marco blinked. Buy it. Every penny. Victor said, quietly. Then offer him a way out. A job. A delivery he thinks will wipe the slate clean. The beginnings of a plan took shape simple. Elegant. Permanent. When he arrives, Victor continued. He's met by our people. He thinks it's work. He thinks it's his salvation. And then Marco asked. Though he already knew. He doesn't leave the warehouse. No anger colored Victor's voice. No heat. Just a calm. Deadly finality. The men nodded. Orders found form. Roles fell into place. Things began moving with a precision that only years of loyalty could create. Victor dismissed them. Make it clean. The job moved fast. By late afternoon the next day, Knox's debt had been quietly bought from every collector he owed. His fear of retaliation shifted instantly to hope when he got the call about a one-time job that would clear everything he owed and put money in his pocket. Desperate men are easy to lead. He drove straight to the address. He was given an abandoned logistics warehouse near the port. He thought he was being offered redemption. What waited for him was consequence. The details of what happened inside those walls would never appear in the police reports. No one would file a missing persons case. No alarms would be raised. The story left behind was stronger than the truth, the unfortunate, predictable end of a man who ran from his debts. By sunrise, Daniel Knox had vanished from Tampa, as cleanly as if he had never existed. To the outside world, He became another man who skipped town, because the pressure finally crushed him. People like him do that all the time. No one looks too closely. No one asks too many questions. And the world moves on. But Victor did not move on. Not entirely. He sat in his office, long after the final confirmation text came in. He didn't pour a drink. He didn't call his men for a debrief. He didn't run the city from behind his desk, the way he usually did. He simply sat there, holding a small piece of paper, the note Lila had written. The handwriting was uneven. Some of the letters were reversed. The paper was too thin, folded too many times. But it carried a weight he hadn't felt in years. Quietly. Then offer him a way out. A job. A delivery he thinks will wipe the slate clean. The beginnings of a plan took shape simple, elegant, permanent. When he arrives, Victor continued. He's met by our people. He thinks it's work. He thinks it's his salvation. And then Marco asked, though he already knew, he doesn't leave the warehouse. No anger colored Victor's voice. No heat. Just a calm, deadly finality. The men nodded. Orders found form. Roles fell into place. Please make my mum's boyfriend leave. He hurts us. Victor read the sentence again. And again. He wasn't a man who let emotions cloud his judgment. He had trained himself long ago to bury softness, where no one could reach it. But tonight, something cracked. Something he thought he had sealed away decades earlier. A part of him that remembered what it was like to be powerless. To be small. To need someone stronger. To step in. And make sure she gets it. Should I tell her who's paying Victor's voice? Softened into something dangerously close to humanity. No. He said. She doesn't need another man. She has to fear. Another pause? Understood. Victor ended the call, and leaned back in his chair. Outside. The first light of morning broke across the water. Somewhere in a small apartment, a little girl would wake up, not knowing how different her world had become, not knowing that a man she had never been supposed to meet had decided she deserved more than survival. For the first time in many years, Victor felt something shift inside him. Not warmth. Not exactly. But something like it. Something thawing. And as the sun rose, he realized the truth. He hadn't just removed a threat. He had begun something much larger. Something he couldn't yet define. But something he would finish. Morning. Sunlight crept slowly across the worn linoleum floor of the Hart family's apartment, touching the space with a brightness it hadn't held in years. The air inside felt different now, lighter. Less tense. As though the very walls had finally unclenched. In the weeks following Daniel Knox's disappearance, life had shifted in quiet ways that Rachel Hart didn't fully understand. And Lila, who understood far more than she let on, said nothing. The first change arrived, disguised as a clerical error. Rachel received a polite phone call from the medical center, informing her that her insurance had unexpectedly approved the newest treatment protocol for her autoimmune condition. It would be fully covered, no copays. No out-of-pocket expenses. Rachel didn't question it. She was too exhausted to fight good news. Then came the second change. Their apartment manager knocked one afternoon with a clipboard and a smile. A renovation project was scheduled on their row of units. The family would need to relocate to a newly updated building on the east side of the complex. The new apartment had stronger locks, thicker walls, and clean, sturdy floors. The rent didn't increase. In fact, it went slightly down due to temporary construction noise. Though Rachel heard none. The third change arrived more quietly. Groceries began showing up at their door only once. Then twice. Then enough times that Rachel assumed the local church must have added her to some donation list. Bags filled with essentials, fruit, cereal, laundry detergent, fresh meat. Not extravagant. Not flashy. Just exactly what a struggling mother of two needed to get through the month without fear. Each gift had a reasonable explanation attached: a community program, a building upgrade, a hospital charity fund. Lila knew better. She could feel the invisible threads tying each miracle back to the same source: Victor De Luca. He never appeared. She never saw him near their home. But every improvement, every small blessing, every easing of a burden carried his signature, a signature written in silence. And slowly, the family rebuilt itself. Rachel began standing straighter. The medication eased her pain, softened the constant fog she had lived in. Instead of sleeping through mornings, she woke ready to cook oatmeal for her daughters. Her hands, once unsteady, now held her coffee mug without trembling. She even laughed sometimes softly, timidly at first, as if afraid the sound might vanish if she asked too much of it. Lila noticed everything. She noticed how Rachel started keeping the curtains open, how she talked about reading books again, how she let Lila walk to school without checking the window every 5 seconds, how she spoke of the future with cautious hope, like someone touching warm water after years of only knowing cold. Her little sister changed, too. The fearful silence that once clung to her began to fade. She hummed while coloring. She asked for bedtime stories. She danced in tiny circles whenever she got excited. The house felt alive in a way it had never been before. One afternoon, Lila's teacher called home to say she'd been selected for an enrichment program, a special class for students who showed advanced potential. A scholarship would cover supplies and after-school activities. Rachel cried when she hung up the phone. She had always known Lila was smart. But hearing someone else say it, someone who wasn't bruised or exhausted, felt like hope growing roots. Life didn't transform overnight. It changed slowly. Like a sunrise. Gentle. Gradual. Certain. Lila lived these days with a secret she held carefully. Like a fragile treasure she didn't want to scratch. She thought of Victor often not in fear, but in gratitude. She pictured him not as the shadowy figure adults whispered about, but as the man who sat on a park bench and listened to her when no one else could. The man who took her note and turned it into something real, something life-saving. He was nowhere and everywhere all at once. Months passed before she saw him again. It was late afternoon when a black sedan rolled quietly alongside her as she walked home from school, her backpack bouncing against her spine. The car didn't honk or screech. It simply matched her pace. Silent and patient. The tinted window lowered with a soft, smooth motion. Victor De Luca sat inside. His expression was unchanged from the day she met him. Calm. Watchful. Carrying a weight he refused to share with the world. But there was something gentler in his eyes this time. Something she couldn't name. Hello. Lila, he said. She stepped closer without fear. Her voice came out small but steady. Hi. He studied her face for a long moment. You're doing well. She nodded. My mom is doing better too. She's awake in the mornings now. She cooks. She smiles again. That's good, he said. She deserves that. Lila hesitated, gripping one backpack strap with both hands. There was a question she had carried for months, one that kept her awake some nights, staring at the ceiling. Why did you help us? She finally asked. Victor exhaled slowly. Not as though annoyed, but as though searching for the right words. The truth was heavier than he expected. Because you reminded me of someone I should have protected a long time ago. Lila didn't understand the history behind that sentence. But she understood the pain underneath it. She understood enough to know that Victor's past held wounds deeper than his reputation ever revealed. I'm glad you helped us, she said softly. Victor nodded once in acknowledgement. A man like him didn't need thanks. But hearing it mattered more than he would admit. The car door opened slightly. Not enough for her to enter. Just far enough for him to place something in her hands, a small velvet box. Soft and dark against her skin. For your 10th birthday, he said. Next week. She opened it slowly. Inside lay a silver charm shaped like a shield. Simple. Delicate. With a small engraving too tiny for her to read without holding it closer. She looked up at him. Startled. It's beautiful. It's a reminder. Victor said. Your future is yours now. My job was just to clear the path. Something tightened in her throat. Something warm and overwhelmed and grateful. She couldn't find the right words. So she did the only thing she could. She closed her fingers around the box and held it to her chest. Victor gave a faint nod. The closest thing to a smile he ever allowed himself. Go on home. Your mother will be waiting. The door closed. The window slid up. The sedan pulled away with quiet grace, turning the corner until it disappeared entirely. Lila stood on the sidewalk long after the car was gone, holding the velvet box as if it held not a charm, but a truth. Not all monsters are monsters. Some are men shaped by darkness, who choose, when it matters most, to shield others from the very shadows they know too well. Some fight cruelty by becoming the thing cruelty fears. Some step into the violence of the world so that children like her don't have to. And as she started walking again, the late afternoon sun warming her shoulders, Lila realized something she would carry for the rest of her life. Sometimes the protector isn't the hero people expect. Sometimes he's the one they whisper about, the one they avoid, the one they fear. Sometimes the monster is the one who saves you. Fade out. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what part of Lila's journey moved you the most. And if you enjoy stories of courage, redemption, and unexpected guardians in a dark world, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who might need a reminder that help sometimes comes from the most unlikely places. Your support helps these stories reach more people and keeps this channel alive. Thank you for being here and for choosing to spend your time with this story.